You've seen the best.
You've seen the worst.
Now here's the rest of both worlds.
I'm GayFesh, and I'm only an empty shell now.
And I'm Ari, and I have no desire to leave the Enterprise.
And today we will be discussing the Star Trek The Next Generation episodes Heart of Glory and The Arsenal of Freedom. Today we're going to be trying a little bit of a format change. In the past, we've basically treated each episode as though you've already watched it and you're coming to this as a companion piece. So all I've done is read the Memory Alpha summary of the episode, but today we're going to try and go through the whole plot as we're talking so that, you know, if you haven't seen it or you haven't seen it in 30 years, you know, it'll help remind you a little bit.
Yeah. So I think it's a good change because I listened to the podcast. Do you listen to the podcast? I think you do.
I mean, I edit it, so yeah, I listened to it about 5 times.
And that's for me. I just came away with the feeling like if I was somebody who had watched it, you know, even if my last rewatch of Next Generation was 4 or 5 years ago, I might not remember the plot of the episodes. So we thought it might be better to start the episodes off with that plot instead.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so today we're going to start with Heart of Glory, which is the 20th episode of the first season. It first aired on the 21st of March, 1988. The teleplay was by Maurice Hurley. The story was by Maurice Hurley, Herbert Wright, and D.C. Fontana. It was directed by Rob Bowman.
All right. This one starts with them getting a communication about a disturbance in the neutral zone.
Yes.
And it's not clear which neutral zone they mean. There are 2 neutral zones that I'm aware of in Star Trek. There is the Klingon Federation neutral zone and the Romulan Federation neutral zone.
Oh, okay. Because this is actually one of my questions. What's a neutral zone?
Well, the neutral zone would be like kind of like a demilitarized zone, like you know you have between North and South Korea.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically, I think the implication is that it's an area where neither side is supposed to enter.
Okay, so they get this call from this neutral zone that we don't know. And and then they throw out a bunch of alien names of who it could possibly be.
Yeah, they're like, could it be the Romulans? Could it be the Ferengi? Yeah.
Right. And they go in thinking it's the Ferengi, right? Because if I remember correctly. And then they discover that it's a couple Klingons instead.
Oh, while they board the ship, they have like they connect Geordi's visor to the view screen via Bluetooth. And Picard geeks out over it.
We're going to talk about that. We're going to come back to that. So, after they find the Klingons, there's obviously some tension. We learn that Worf has a tragic backstory. Surprise. I didn't know that. And then we go, really, the rest of the episode is figuring out how to resolve this issue with the Klingon.
Right, because the Klingons at first, they say, oh, yeah, no, the freighter was attacked and we were the only survivors. But it turns out, no, they raided the freighter because they're tired of the peace between the Federation and the Klingons. They think that peace has made Klingons weak.
So we're here with another insurrectionist, and we have to decide if they're right or wrong, just like on Angel One, right? We're here's some people who are trying to do what they think is right, but it goes against everything else that they're doing, that their people are doing. Yeah, I thought it was an interesting episode. What did you think?
Yeah, I really liked it.
Well,
I've seen everything before.
Yeah.
This is the first real character development we get for Worf in the show.
Yeah, he at least quadrupled his dialogue from the whole season in this one episode. Like, finally, I felt like, oh, good, finally, I get a Worf episode.
It really establishes like some of the most key elements of his character. The fact that he was raised by humans, that is huge because Worf, I kind of describe him as like a Klingon weeaboo. Do you know what a weeaboo is?
I do.
Yeah. So because he was separated from the Klingons when he was like, I don't know, 5.
Before the age of inclusion. I don't know what that means, but before the age of inclusion.
As a little kid. And so he has very few direct memories of being raised by Klingons. So a lot of his ideas about Klingon ideals and honor and everything are from an outsider's perspective. So
this brings up one of my first issues that I had with this episode is, so when it's the picture on Memory Alpha as well, they're doing their death wail and,
which I love.
I have a lot to say about the death wail, but starting with, how did Worf know how to do it if no one outside of Klingons has ever seen it before and he wasn't raised?
Well, I'm sure he still has memories of growing up on Khitomer. pretty sure that they had done it there. Also, like, Data knew about it, so it was in the, if it's information that the Federation has access to, I guarantee you Worf's already read it because he's a nerd.
That's true. He does know a lot about his own culture, like a lot about his own culture. Like he's clearly read up and taught himself all about his culture. But I mean, I'm sure much like a foster kid, which is how they kind of like referenced him because he said his foster brother. So they were trying to put it in the context for us of like being a foster kid in America. A lot of foster kids struggle with that. Like they're placed in homes with different ethnic identities than their own, and they have to learn to navigate the world on kind of riding the fence between the two, right?
Yeah.
And so I thought that was really interesting. I thought it was an interesting character development for Worf because I didn't know that he was the only Klingon in Starfleet. I didn't know that he had been raised by humans, and I assume this is where this was established, correct?
Yeah.
Interesting. Also, we had a DC Fontana story without any weird political drama. I guess there's some political drama because it's about the Alliance, but it's not the same thing as like delegates. Going somewhere for a delegate type thing, because the two times we've had a DC Fontana story, there's been some weird political intrigue in there that doesn't feel like it belongs.
Commander Chorus, the main Klingon character in this one, he's played by Vaughn Armstrong, who I want to say probably holds the record for playing the most like characters in Star Trek. It's either him or Jeffrey Combs. Like he's been in basically every series from like TNG through to Enterprise.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, they do. I guess they probably do have a lot of reoccurring characters because a lot of time are actors, I should say. When I go to look up an actor, you'll see that they have 2 or 3 different times throughout Star Treks,
Okay, I'm looking him up on Memory Alpha. He has like 12 characters listed.
Oh, that's so many. I guess when you have a lot of makeup, it doesn't matter, right? Like I'm not going to recognize him if he shows up as a different alien type. So let's talk about the death throes whale.
Yeah, let's do it.
There's a few things. The first for me was it really, really reminded me of the scene in Midsummer.
Oh,
when the ladies scream with Danny because she's going through so much like turmoil and like so much emotional because they're putting her through her paces, right? So she can become the Maiden of the Ball or whatever it was called.
Yeah, they're grooming her.
She catches her boyfriend cheating, right? Because they've tricked him into it, essentially. I think maybe he was drugged. It's been a little while since I watched it.
He was drugged. He was being raped. But like from what she saw, he was just cheating on her.
That's right. It was rape because he was drugged and he didn't really have a lot of control over it. But what she saw was, oh, my boyfriend is cheating on me. And he'd already been a jerk the whole time they were in Sweden anyway.
Yeah.
So anyway, it reminded me of that. Something that a lot of women, myself included, found very powerful is that in that scene when she's expressing her grief, it comes out as these like primal screams, and the women all gather around her and join in, and it's like this very firm like sense of like primal rage that they're all expressing together, and it reminded me of that. And I was like, I thought that was interesting because you don't generally see the Klingons expressing a lot of emotion, but this felt like it was a very big surge of emotion that they were allowed to show.
Well, Worf doesn't express a lot of emotion. Klingons, I think, are very emotive.
Worf's
a very repressed person. I mean, there's in Deep Space Nine, there's a conversation where Worf tells somebody, he's like, Klingons do not laugh, and they reply, I've heard a Klingon give a belly laugh that would shake the paint off the bulkheads. No, Worf, you don't laugh.
So he thinks that his personality is applicable to all Klingons.
Right, yeah. Like I said, he's a weeaboo. He is an outsider to Klingon culture, so he has this ideal of what it means to be a Klingon that is unattainable and unrealistic.
I like it because it's almost a little bit Spock-like, right? A little bit, even in this episode, because he is having the conversation about how the real control comes inside and he has to control the emotions and stuff like that. And it causes that kind of same conflict where Spock never got to tell his mom that he loved her, for example, because of being that. So I wonder if they were trying to reference back to that type of thing. The first time that he howls, I thought that Worf wasn't showing any emotion on his face and it looked really fake. And I thought maybe that was because of not knowing this particular Klingon, right?
Yeah, I'm sure it was. He didn't have a connection to him.
But then I think it's the makeup. When I watched him do it the second time, because he can't like scrunch his forehead together, or
That's
anything
true.
that would make your face look like you were in anguish, right?
It's not an anguished cry, though. I mean, the reason they do it is to warn the dead that a Klingon warrior is about to arrive.
Which is just a cool piece of folklore. Like, it's
Oh,
so
I
cool.
love it
It's so
so
cool.
much.
Yeah, like, it's just cool writing on the part of, like, giving the Klingons. Is that from this episode, or did it exist before, like, from
It's
original
from this
series?
episode.
Okay.
It's from this episode. There's very little building up of Klingon culture before the Next Generation.
Okay. Because all I remember is the movies, and I don't remember them very well for having Klingons. So then so let's back up to the Geordi Visor thing, though, because that was so weird. It was Picard just kind of geeking out over, like, oh, this is how you see people. And he's like, of course an android has that aura. He's an android. And I was like, why are you saying of course?
Well, Geordi's only context for seeing is what he sees.
True.
And it's not something he has general conversation with. So, of course, Data's an android. He's got an aura.
I thought it was interesting because I would think that being an android, he wouldn't have an aura, right? Because he'd be a piece of equipment. So I thought that was interesting.
I assume it's some electrical signal coming off of him or something.
Coming off of him that looks like an aura. Yeah. And I really thought my notes say apparently this is a Geordi episode, which is funny because the next episode is a Geordi episode, but it turned out it was just not really a Geordi episode.
Nope, this was just they just wanted to show off show us what Geordi sees. And this isn't the last time we see somebody patch into Geordi's visor. Actually, they use it in Star Trek Generations, but in that case, it's basically just a video feed. Like, his vision just looks normal in that one. So I guess they decided it didn't look good enough for a movie.
It was kind of bad looking. It looked like, when you're watching, well, I don't know if you watch them. Sometimes I give in and I watch ghost hunting shows. So it's kind of like in the ghost hunting shows when they use the forward projection, like infrared lights or whatever, and you're watching it and they're like, look at that over there. It's a ghost. And you're like, it's not a ghost. Yeah, that's what it reminded me of.
It was just heavily distorted video that they had shot, and
interesting. I thought it was interesting because it took a whole 5 minutes away from the episode.
Also, like when Picard's like, "What is that? What is that?" and I'm like, "It's Riker," and he's like, "But what is it?" He's like, "Oh yeah, that's Riker." Well, it just looks like a form, and I'm looking. I'm like, no, it looks like Riker, but just with bad editing on top of him. What are you talking about?
I know.
It's obviously a person.
It's Commander Riker. I was like, guys, it's so obvious who it is. Yeah, I don't know. I thought it was weird.
It was in the shape of a person. Even if you couldn't make out the facial details, Picard should have said, "Who is that?" Not "What is that?" He should have recognized. Oh, it's either Riker or Data. Who is it?
It's a human being. Yeah. So do you know what the age of inclusion is, or is that just a term they use? Okay.
No idea. I also don't know if the Klingon spoken in this episode was accurate or not. There is an actually developed Klingon language with speakers and everything. But I think for a lot of Klingon used on screen on the TV shows, it really depends on whether the writer wanted to go through the effort of actually doing it. Sometimes it is just written as phonetic sounds in the script that doesn't actually mean anything. But I do know in the movies, especially Star Trek 6, and in Star Trek Discovery, they make sure that they're actually speaking correct Klingon.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I knew it was a language because it's one of those things you hear, right?
Yeah.
Like being a geek, you're out in the world and people are like, oh, I know how to speak Klingon. You can learn the entire language of Klingon. I think it might even be on Duolingo.
Yeah, they recently added it to Duolingo a couple years ago. And I tried it for 5 minutes and I was like, no, I'm not going to do this. I'm a Star Trek nerd, but I'm going to draw the line at trying to learn the language. I'm good with my English, Spanish, and Russian. I'll just stick with those.
I don't think you watch The Office, but there's an episode where in the very last season where Pete, who they brought in for the last season to basically be the new Jim because Jim had gotten too old to be the, young romantic lead dude.
Right.
And he's trying to teach Erin a language and he teaches her Dothraki. And I thought
nice.
I've told people a million times if that episode had been made at the beginning of the series, it 100% would have been Klingon. 100%. And so I just think it's interesting that there's this whole entire language out there and everybody talks about how Tolkien created Elvish, but people don't really did the writers create Klingon, or was it a fan created thing that they created an actual language that was speakable?
Actually, I think the first person credited with developing Klingon as a language is James Doohan. Scotty, yeah, because in the first Star Trek movie, when the Klingons encounter V'ger, James Doohan actually dubs over the actors with an alien language, because I think they were just saying the lines in English, but then James Doohan would just make sounds that matched like the lip movements, but sounded like an alien language. So he was the first, because that was the first time we had seen Klingons not speaking English. In the original series, they would just always speak English.
Interesting.
Okay, here we are. The Klingon language, as spoken, was originally developed by UCLA dialectician Hartmut Scharf, James Doohan, and John Povil for Star Trek The Motion Picture. And the Klingon language is expanded for Star Trek 3 by Mark Orkrand. Other people have developed it over the years.
But it started in-house in Star Trek, it sounds like, yeah.
Well, I mean, obviously, Klingons are Star Trek.
I just wondered, because you know how fans are. I didn't know if the fans took the, like, they had made some random noises and they were like, I'm going to turn this into an entire language, and then retroactively Star Trek, took it. Because I can see, like, lots of that stuff happens. That's why I was wondering.
There's probably some Klingon words that have been developed just by the fan community that have been adopted in, because it's, there is a community of speakers, and the language as on screen is pretty limited. They don't have a full vocabulary for everything, so a lot of things had to be,
created on the fly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they get these Klingons, and first off, they throw around a bunch of names: the Romulans, the Talarians, because I think that's what the ship ended up being, was a Talarian ship, right?
Yeah, I thought it looked like, I don't know if it was a Talarian ship or a Dick ship, though. Like, that thing looked like a peen.
Now that you mention it. It's the opposite of Arthur C. Clarke's 2001 head-shaped spaceships that he loves. Actually, no, wait, in 2001 Discovery 1 looks like a penis too, never mind. But yes, I'm over here holding my head in my hands, and I'm like, yeah, it sure did look like a penis, now that you mention it. And so they get them over and they lie, right? And it's obvious they're lying. It's obvious to all of us that they're lying.
Of course.
And I liked that they're like, oh, you haven't even seen battle. And he's like, yeah, I've seen battle, Worf does. And I'm like, yeah, you fought those chipmunk Ferengis with their dryer tubes. You tell them.
I'm pretty sure he's seen battle before he served on the Enterprise as well.
Oh, I'm sure. I just thought, especially like because they foreshadowed the dryer tubes when they were walking around the ship. There was like dryer tubes hanging from the ceiling. And I was like, the Ferengi have been here. Turned out they had not been there. It was all a lie.
It's so funny in this first season how anytime something bad is happening, like their first instinct is it the Ferengi? They really wanted to make the Ferengi the big villains of TNG.
They're trying so hard to make me afraid of them, but it's so hard to be afraid of them.
Yeah, they're little dudes with butt heads. Like, I'm not afraid.
It's true. But I thought it was interesting how they did just try to throw the Ferengi under the bus for it, because it felt like, I don't know, like, oh, let's blame these people of color for this thing that one person in that culture did or whatever. And then they get on the Enterprise and everybody's profiling them. Like, what is going on here? Because at this point, they seem to be pretty friendly with the Klingons, right?
Yeah, they're...
As the Federation. We've got one on our ship, for crying out loud.
They've had peace for like 80 years at this point. Yeah, it's weird that they'd still be so hesitant toward the Klingons.
And rude. Tasha was even kind of rude. I mean, it turned out they were lying, but she was still kind of rude.
Well, she assumes that he was taking the little girl hostage, which, like, I think that was a reasonable assumption when they all show up to arrest him and he immediately picks up a little girl. Like, I would have assumed that myself.
It was weird that he picked her up, because at first I was like, why is she assuming that he's taking her hostage? And I was like, oh, because he picked her up. Like, if a little kid runs up to you and it's not your little kid, you don't generally pick him up, you know?
Uh-huh.
So they come down and they're going to erase them. They're going to arrest them. Right. Mm-hmm. To give them back to and the whole thing here is that they're trying to stop the Klingons from this 80-year peace, because it goes against their like culture.
Yeah, they're like, no, we need to fight. Like, I'm pretty sure the Klingons have other enemies than the Federation, like, at some point. Like, I'm pretty sure you could find a fight if you want one. Of course, they did find a fight. That was kind of the point. But they even, like, they even, when, like, they destroyed the Klingon ship that came for them before the episode started, like...
Oh, they did. That's right, yeah.
Yeah. What I thought was weird was how distrustful everyone became of Worf.
I know. I thought that was really weird too.
Like he's a Starfleet officer. He's your comrade. He's your shipmate. Why are you casting doubt just because there's Klingons? Like, it's so weird. It would be like if you've got like a black coworker and then like somebody is black is like robbing the store and you're like, are you gonna side with the robber? Like, no.
Right.
Why would you think that? That's racist.
I know, that's what it felt like. And my notes even say, is everyone being racist? And underneath it says, are they profiling Worf now? Like, I was like irritated because he's worked with them. He's been there since the beginning of the show, at least. I don't know how long they had been together as a crew. I can't remember.
Like a year at this point.
Yeah. And so, like, I don't know. It felt weird to me. Like, I was thinking about it from the perspective of being a human woman and how, like, if it was a ship full of men and I was the only woman and then women came aboard our ship and did something wrong, would I immediately be suspected of, like, being with them because we're the same gender? Yeah, I don't think so. So it's just weird.
In the situation that you laid out, a ship full of entirely men and you're the only woman suggests that it's a rather patriarchal society.
True.
So they probably would suspect you.
Okay. Maybe a little bit. And I might side with the women, maybe a little bit. I did like the line, what burns in their eyes fuels my soul. I thought that was a good line.
Oh, I love, like, Klingons are, like, they've got, like, some of the most poetic hearts. Their poetry is all about, you know, like, murder and everything, but it's, you know, they've got panache with it.
Oh, where was Deanna? Where was she? I wanted to know her take on the Klingons. Yeah, and she just wasn't even there. For once, I wanted to hear what Deanna was going to tell us that was very obvious that she wasn't there. And I was like, oh, this is stupid. I want to know what she thinks. Because if she had been there, she might have figured out the deception earlier, is my point. Which is probably why she wasn't there. Yeah. We didn't get to talk about one of my favorite lines because I forgot and skipped over it. But when they're geeking out, when Picard is geeking out over Geordi's visor, I loved I hate to break this up. And I just thought that was such a great line. It's so funny. I hate to break up this moment of you guys geeking out over Geordi's visor, but we have stuff to do, guys.
Yeah. Okay, Memory Alpha has nothing about why Marina Sirtis wasn't in this episode. Will Wheaton also wasn't in this episode, but he's not in a lot of the episodes. This one or the
next one. Yeah, I know.
Well, he had a film career still. He was doing other jobs at the same time.
How do random people get into engineering? Are doors not keycard locked? Or, like, why don't we believe in locks on the Enterprise?
Yeah, security, especially in this episode, I don't know what security is doing. Like, okay, we've got to arrest these two Klingons. Let's just throw them in the cell without patting them down.
Oh yeah, let's let them keep their entire armor.
Yeah,
so they can build a put me together gun.
Yeah, surely you'd be able to recognize even if it's all taken apart. It's like, no, that is definitely the rifling for a Klingon disruptor. I'm going to take that from you because I don't want you to put one together.
They have to be caught together because if I was watching and I think they had to take parts off of both outfits to complete the gun. So if they're taken hostage together, they have to. I mean, if they're taken hostage apart, they have no way of getting out. I don't know. It was weird that they just threw them in that room.
I do like the idea of having your gun disassembled and just hidden in pieces of your armor, though. Like that is
sight. Yeah.
Yeah, that is a cool way to do it.
Traitors of Kling. I guess I had never really realized that Klingons came from Kling.
Well, here's the thing: they don't.
Oh.
The Klingon homeworld is named Kronos.
Yeah, okay, that sounds familiar.
But that wasn't established yet. They don't come up with the name for the planet until Star Trek 6. And I think the idea was Kling would be the name of the homeworld in the dialogue here, but then they realized that sounds stupid, so they didn't go with it.
Stupid. It sounds like Kling rap. It sounds like we're watching a Saran wrap episode. A Klingon actually does too. Now that I'm saying this out loud, but Yeah, Traders of Kling. I was like, oh, that's a new one. I have not heard the term Kling before.
I think you could probably just rationalize it as like maybe Kling is like a city on Kronos, like a big
That's
cultural center or something like that.
Yeah, like wipe away the plot hole.
Yeah.
Another line I really liked, I have tasted your heart. I thought that was a good line. I don't know. I like the Klingon and their like very dramatic way that they talk. So the phasers, they have to set them between stun and kill. What other options are there other than stun and kill? Are there only stun and kill?
I think there are 16 settings.
I wasn't expecting that many.
But yeah, generally, you know, like maximum would be kill and minimum would be there might be like multiple stun settings. Like a low stun might not even like knock somebody out, that might just push them or something. So
at what point during his heart to heart did Worf decide that he was going to kill that man? Because he had his phaser was obviously set to kill, right? So at what point did he like, was he running it around with it on kill? Because they always announce what to put the phasers on.
I don't know.
I just thought it was interesting because I thought he was going to stun him. I didn't think he was going to kill him. But then I realized the reason that he killed him was to give him a death in battle like Klingons want, like going to Valhalla or whatever, right? They want to die in battle, so... Yeah,
if they handed him over to the Klingon cruiser, he would have just been executed without honor. Worf gave him a death in battle, which ensures his soul's delivery to Sto-vo-kor.
Oh, there is a place, a Valhalla for Klingons. Okay.
Yep, it's called Sto-vo-kor.
And I'm assuming it's based on Valhalla, right?
Yeah. Yeah, okay. It's there's a lot of mixing of like Viking and Greek mythology with the Klingon afterlife mythology. Like the souls that don't make it to Sto-vo-kor go to Grethor, I want to say is it's called. But they like sail on a barge on the ocean of the dead to go to hell, basically.
Interesting. Okay. I was a little irritated that Picard said Chorus and the other Klingon when we had been told his name. I also don't remember it, but I am not the captain of a starship. And I thought it was really rude. I was like, you know his name, Picard. And it seemed very un-Picard-like to not use his name either. I don't know.
I'm forgetting his name. I'm looking it up now.
I know. I can't remember it either. I feel bad because it's kind of not making my point. But
it was Conmel.
Conmel. Yeah, that's right. But yeah, when he's like, and the other Klingon, I was like, wow, that's so rude. He's a person, Picard.
Also, I don't like the Klingon makeup in this episode. They used like basically the same mold for all of the Klingons other than Worf here. Which has like the plus sign on the forehead.
Yeah, I noticed they were similar. Like I thought maybe that was supposed to mean they were related.
Usually it is.
Okay.
Usually you'll have like members of a house will all have very similar forehead bumps. So yeah, it usually is a familial thing. But here it's just they're all just wearing the same molds. Like the Klingon captain on the cruiser that wanted to take them, he had the same thing. And I don't know. It's a very cheap looking one. Klingon makeup gets a lot better later on once they start mixing things up.
They like I said with the emotion, they can't emote with that huge thing either. It's hard. Like they have to do all their emoting through their eyes and their mouth, and it makes it hard for them to emote.
There's a Klingon character that we'll be meeting in a couple seasons here, named Gowron. And that dude has eyes. That dude can act with his eyes. Like I think there's a meme where it's just like him with his eyes wide and its caption stares in Klingon.
Yes, I've seen that. I didn't know what it was in reference to, but I've seen it.
That's Gowron. He has amazing eyes.
That's amazing. So overall, first Klingon episode, I thought it was pretty good. I was pretty excited. I liked it.
Before we move on to the next episode, there's one last thing that I noted on the Klingon captain's ship is behind him on one side he had the Klingon Empire logo, which is like the triangle looking thing. It's like the circle with the three triangles sticking out in different directions. But then on the other side he had the Federation flag.
Oh, Yeah, I saw that, and I figured that was just to like nod to the Alliance, right? That's what I assumed.
Actually, I think at this point they were thinking that the Klingons had joined the Federation. They just weren't like enlisting in Starfleet, but it was just the peace meant that they became a part of the Federation. I think they just hadn't fully established what the relationship between the Klingon Empire and the Federation was yet. Because I think even when they had Worf on the Enterprise, I think that was supposed to imply that the Klingons were now part of the Federation.
Yeah, because they allowed one of their enemy races into Starfleet. I thought so too. I thought that's what I assumed by having Worf there. I also didn't know he was the only one. I just assumed that there was others.
Well, I mean, there are others later, like B'Elanna Torres in Voyager. She was she's Klingon, so but you know, she joins later.
Okay, are we ready to move on to the next episode, The Arsenal of Freedom?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, this is the 21st episode of the first season. We're so close to the end of the first season already. It first aired on the 11th of April, 1988. The teleplay was by Richard Manning and Hans Beimler. Story by Maurice Hurley and Robert Lewin, and directed by Les Landau.
So this one is an interesting episode.
It is. It has three plots.
So there's a missing ship that they are trying to hunt down, the Drake.
Yes.
And its captain was an academy classmate of Riker's. And we never find out what happens to that ship.
No.
Like, they show up to the planet, but we never actually find out what happens to it. So it's just MIA, I guess. But the planet is...
Wait, no. The ship that's missing, I thought that was what was making the weapons, but you're right.
No.
You know how when they're in the pit at the bottom... or they're at the bottom of the pit, and it turns out that there's a bunch of computers down there. In my mind, I thought that was the ship, but now I'm realizing it's not. Is it?
No.
Oh.
So, speaking of that planet, they scan the planet and they don't find any life signs, and they thought it was a civilized planet. So
they said no signs of unintelligent or intelligent life at least 5 times. I was like, okay, we get it, guys. It's going to be, a computer or something.
And so Data explains this planet was like, they were like arms merchants, and it turns out that they probably just wiped themselves out with their weapons. They're contacted by an automated system which shows up as like the most used car salesman actor there has ever been.
Jenny Callender's uncle.
Yeah, you've said that to me in text, and I didn't remember in Buffy that I didn't remember her uncle at all. I had to look that up.
He's the one that comes to tell her that she has to be following Angel to make sure he's suffering.
Oh, okay.
He's the one that's like sent Jenny here. I'm trying not to use the racist word that they use in the show.
Oh, right.
He has sent Jenny Callender here to watch Angel and make sure he's suffering enough because of the curse that his people put on Angel for killing their favorite daughter.
Okay, I vaguely
remember that. So he's only in a couple episodes. He's just there to tell her, hey, do your job. But when I saw him, I was like, Jenny's uncle!
So, yeah, they're contacted by this used car salesman, Jenny Callender's uncle, automated recording saying, hey, we want to sell you weapons. And I don't know why, but they decide, hey, let's beam down to this planet where there's no life, where they made a bunch of weapons to see what happened.
That was so stupid. I was like, what are you guys doing? But they did it. They went down. I assumed it was a personal thing for Riker to go down.
Yeah, because he was friends with what was his name?
Oh, I have it written down. Rice.
Yeah, Paul Rice.
Yeah.
And so it's Riker, Yar, and Data beam down, and they beam down to the alien planet set.
Yeah, the original series Alien Planet set. Yeah, I have TOS series written on here somewhere, or TOS set.
And they just threw a bunch of tropical plants in there, all very, very obviously sitting in pots that are just hiding like right below where the camera can see them.
I know. They were at least real pot plants.
But the sky was obviously fake. Like, you see it, and it's just like this really deep shade of blue that it's like, yeah, that's just the soundstage the background.
And then they trap Riker in this energy field, and then so Picard brings himself and Beverly down and leaves Geordi in charge of the Enterprise, which I was excited to see again.
Which was great for Geordi, but that was a really dumb move for Picard to beam himself down. I don't know what he was thinking.
I know. Well, he needed to get trapped in the romantic adventure with Beverly, which we'll talk about when we get to that part. But so then Geordi takes over, and really the episode ends up being about Geordi and the decisions that he makes while the Megrathea used car salesman guy is kind of ends up being the subplot, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Because there was to me, the whole point ended up being about Geordi and what decisions he was going to make and if he was going to get the Enterprise safely home.
Yeah, because one of the the weapons on the planet are being like manufactured and they're attacking everyone. And so there's two of them. There's one that's attacking the people on the ground, and there's one that's attacking the Enterprise. And so Geordi can't. Every time they try and fire at, like, they can't find anything. It's just it shoots at them and then disappears. So eventually, Geordi decides to do a saucer separation.
I was so excited to see a saucer separation.
I forgot that this episode had the saucer separation. When they started discussing it, I'm like, oh, they're going to rule it out because they never do the saucer separation on the show, and they did it. And then actually, Geordi had a really cool way of finding the enemy ship because he ends up like taking the ship into the atmosphere, and to where like the atmosphere is like heating up around the ship and creating that like flame trail. And the weapon probe also follows it into the atmosphere, and that's how they're able to find it because it's also got that heat trail.
Yeah, I thought it was great. I mean, do we want to start with the Geordi stuff because it comes towards the episode? Okay, so I thought it was great, and I really, really liked the way that when that guy came up and was like huffing and puffing at him about how he should take over, Geordi stood up for himself. And then you think he's going to give in when he calls the guy back, and he's like, you think he's going to be like, okay, I can't handle it. I'm going to give the ship over to this other guy. And it turns out that he's just going to separate the ship, do this big thing they never do. And then he's going to go back for his people. And I thought it was such a great episode for Geordi.
Did you notice how we have a new chief engineer again?
Yeah, my notes say I miss Argyle. So yes, I did notice.
I don't even think this guy is the last chief engineer before Geordi takes over. I think there's going to be like one more because I was looking at the list of chief engineers of the Enterprise on Memory Alpha, and there's like one more name before Geordi's.
Okay, so remember how we were talking, I think it was last episode, about how people step in and take over, like when Geordi's put in charge and there's always just someone waiting in the wings to take over. Yeah. So I noticed this episode because I kept an eye on it, that as soon as Picard said, Geordi, take the helm or whatever, Solus, who ends up being with Geordi for the rest of the episode, comes out of the turbo lift within 10 seconds and walks over to his seat.
Yeah, I caught that too.
Yeah, and so maybe it's like part of their... Maybe the computer is like, okay, this person's been moved to this, and then the computer tells the people time to move up, because there's got to be an automated system so that this can happen fast, like during battle or whatever, right? Where Picard can be like, hey, take over the helm, and they would need somebody else to take up. So maybe the computer just tracks who it is and alerts the new person that they need to come and take their spot, because I noticed that with this episode this time, is that he came right out of the turbo lift as soon as he moved.
Well, yeah, it could be that. I also know that Riker's job is like a part of Riker's job is like shift assignments. As the XO, he handles a lot of just like the nitty gritty of ship operations, and so he's usually running shifts. But so there may just be a standby bridge crew that just hangs out in like a standby area, like on deck 2 maybe, and then they just it's like, oh, they need me, and they just pop up that turbo
they just wait. Yep. Did you notice that the weapon that they take the moss off of, and it's perfectly clean underneath the moss, looked exactly like a giant Doctor Who sonic screwdriver?
I didn't notice that, but I was like, for something that has like plant overgrowth, that plant overgrowth sure just brushes off like it had been put on it 5 minutes before.
I know. So Sue, she had a lot of lines. I thought she was going to be more important because of how many lines she had. So is she going to end up being a reoccurring character, or did she just end up having a lot of lines in this episode?
She's just in this episode, and she was there to, give Geordi some casts to interact with, I assume.
Interesting. Yeah, I thought it was interesting how many lines she had. What about the good ship lollipop comments?
Oh, that was great.
It was so good. I was like, and it was so like relevant to 1988 too, because like we were still seeing those Shirley Temple like
Oh yeah, I
the
remember Shirley
complete
Temple.
collection, like commercials at night and stuff. And I remember the Good Ship Lollipop and her tap dancing across my screen when I was sick as a kid in that era, all the time.
The weapon generates an image of Paul Rice that
Right.
it uses to try and gather information from Riker, and Riker like immediately susses out. He's like, "Oh, this isn't actually Rice. This is a."
And he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm on a new ship now, the Lollipop." And I was like, "The Lollipop," and then I figured it out when he said it's a real good ship. I was like, "Oh, I want to go have some words with the writers."
I also like how Riker is like trying to trip up the program, and it's like, "What's the armament of the Lollipop?" And then Riker goes, 10.
I know.
10?
He's
10
like,
what? 6.
My notes say in all in capital letters, unintelligent life. I'm shocked, I tell you. Because they set it up so much. Like, okay, we get it. It's going to be and they don't mean unintelligent life, because obviously the computer is intelligent. They just mean it's not life, but my brain was like, oh, look, unintelligent life. Oh, I thought so. They put Riker in that thing, the bubble, know, and they're trying to describe it to Picard, and and they're like, it's some kind of energy field. And my brain was like, remember when you taught Paul Atreides? Like, it's just like that, except for he can't move.
Well, also you can easily see into it. The shield effects in the original Dune movie were
so bad.
They're so bad. Like, I get what they were going for, but you couldn't see what was going on. It was like 2 Roblox characters fighting or something.
It was like 2 Roblox characters fighting.
Yeah, that was really dumb. That as soon as Riker's in a bubble, Picard's like, "Oh, well, I'm going down too."
Yeah, I know. This is what they taught me in Starfleet.
Yeah. And Deanna's even like, "What are you insane? You can't go." And he's just like, "Yeah, your objection is noted. I'm going down." And of course, he goes down with Beverly so that they can set up them falling down a hole and
to have fun, romantic Jean-Luc and Beverly adventures in the underground. I know.
That's right. How about when Beverly falls down that hole, like,
and takes Jean-Luc with her on purpose?
The way that Gates acts that falling, it was just so bad. The going forward and going back, and it was just like, oh.
And then they're grabbing him as she goes too, because all of it was just awkward and terrible. But I was just like, this is so weird.
Also, I want to know how was Picard just totally fine?
I know. He was 100% okay.
when they find them down the hole, like, Data scans the hole and he's like, "Oh yeah, that's 11.75 meters down." I'm like, that's like 30, 40 feet.
Uh-huh.
That's a long fall.
Yeah, because they're like, well, we can't get down there. And I'm like, well, then how come Picard is it? Well, I guess he used Bevis's pillow, but...
Well, and they were like, "Data, I don't even know that you can survive that fall." And I'm like, well, Picard was fine. I mean, obviously Beverly wasn't. She got messed way the hell up there. She was losing a lot of blood that they had covered over with sand so that, it was still fine for TV, but...
Right. Yeah, it was so weird that I know she's the doctor, but Jean-Luc is not an idiot. He doesn't spell knife with an N. And he doesn't even think to check her legs that are covered in the sand. And she's like, oh, there's another injury. She also, as a doctor, doesn't bother to tell him right away there's another injury she's losing a lot of blood from.
She's concussed and losing blood. So
right. She is. And she's in shock. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I was so mad he ripped her favorite blue jacket. I was like, but that's her favorite blue jacket.
She can replicate another one.
I'm sure the replicator can make another one.
Also, he ripped that really easily. Like, every time.
Have you tried to rip polyester lately?
Every time in fiction, like in a movie or a TV show, when somebody rips clothing, it's always so easy. Like, I'm thinking to, like, in The Sound of Music, when Captain Von Trapp rips the Nazi flag in half.
Oh. And a flag in particular is really hard.
Yeah, have you tried that? Like, no, you had they had to pre-cut that thing in the prop department, or like specifically design that seam to be easy to rip. Like, they don't just
flags
tear
don't
like
have
that.
seams in the middle of them, but it's like it rips right down the seam. Yeah, I know. No, yeah, I know what you mean. And then when he tore it, it just tore right off. But I was like, not her jacket, not her doctor jacket.
I love her doctor jacket.
I know. I liked I have a concussion. You're going to have to keep me awake all night long. It was so Marla Singer from Fight Club when she takes the pills or whatever.
When she said that she needed to keep her legs elevated and needed to keep warm, my first thought was, Picard, go cuddle with her.
We all thought it. My husband was like, oh, are they going to cuddle? We were all like, okay, now you got to keep each other warm.
And even in a completely platonic situation, that would still make sense. And she would be like, yes, I need your body heat to stay warm.
And instead he paced the corners of the room.
Yeah.
I know, it was weird. So let's see. So they're fighting the Doomsday monster that can change it adapts every time they fight it, right?
Yeah.
But the first time one phaser takes it out, the second time 2 takes it out, and the third time 3 takes it out, right?
Right.
It was weird.
It didn't seem like it was that efficient of a weapon if, there's just 3 of them on the surface and they're still alive after the third attempt. I kind of feel like they would have had some baseline programming to be a more efficient killing machine than that.
I know. I did not think. I think that part of the plot was really badly done.
When Picard activates the used car salesman and then agrees to the sale to get the thing
How much
to shut
did
off.
he just cost the Federation?
Well, nothing, because the program was just like, oh, I've got a sale, and then shuts off the demonstration. He didn't actually sell him anything, but it immediately shuts off the one on the surface, but the one attacking the Enterprise is still going.
That's what was weird, right? Yeah, because he's like, oh, I made a sale, great. But Geordi still has to do his thing,
And I mean, from a story perspective, I understand why they had Geordi do that thing to figure it out instead of it just vanishing and then taking away his personal character's victory. But it would seem like it would have been easy enough to just swap those scenes so the Geordi defeats his first before Picard gets the system shut off. Yeah, and I don't know why they did it that way. I'm wondering if it was just
bad editing.
Yeah,
yeah. They wanted to have Geordi's scene probably be the last the last scene before we had the oh, it's over scene. So maybe that's what it is. Also, a shot in the dark is better than nothing is a terrible strategy. Just shooting randomly into the dark is not better than not shooting. You don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
I have in my notes, did he call Logan down here just to show off? Because I didn't realize he was going to give him the saucer. And so he calls him down and he starts giving all these orders and stuff.
Well, I also thought that was a little weird because engineering is on the star drive section, not the saucer section. And I was thinking, well, he's chief engineer. Shouldn't he be with the engine room? But then I realized, they'll have another chief engineer.
Okay, but so as far as the chain of command goes, though, this is how it seems to go. It goes Picard, and then Riker, and then Data. And then Geordi.
It seems like it's that way in the first season. I think in season 2...
Geordi's only got 1.5 pips.
Yeah, I think part of that is just Geordi's a bridge officer.
Mm-hmm.
And Logan is not. Logan is the engineering officer. So I think probably there's just a certain level of if you're a bridge officer, there are certain in a pinch you can take command because you're already there.
I'm trying to understand the chain of command. So I'm not a military person. I've never been in the military, and I don't know a lot about the Star Trek military. But so that guy comes down and says, "I'm higher ranking than you. Give me control of the bridge." Shouldn't Geordi have to do it?
I don't know myself how it was. I think it's
confused by that. Yeah,
I think it's because Captain
Picard had given the order.
Right, and Picard is still captain of the Enterprise, so it's his standing orders. So, if an admiral had come by and done it, then that probably would have override it, but a lieutenant can't override a captain's order.
Oh, that makes sense, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, random question. Do you know if the Federation uses Celsius or Fahrenheit? Because they kept yelling out temperatures.
I'm pretty sure they use Celsius. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they're all metric units in the future.
So I definitely think that the used salesman guy is definitely a reference to Magrathea from Hitchhiker's Guide. Because when they approach Magrathea in Hitchhiker's Guide, there's an automated video recording of salespeople trying to sell them things, a new planet. And that's when the improbability drive turns them into like the falling whale and the pot of petunias that everybody knows about. But right before that, they've approached Magrathea and they get a hologram, basically like a video feed that says, "Welcome to Magrathea, where you can all your planetary needs." It really reminded me of that. It felt like a deliberate reference. Also, there was a point, I think during Geordi's like big scene, that they said Mark 007, and I felt like that had to be a 007 reference, but maybe because why would they use 007 if not?
That probably was a yeah. I mean, there's always a bunch of just like little references here and
it's
there.
Just
like
cute because
they're nerds.
It's cute to pick up on. Yeah, I like seeing that kind of stuff.
There's also a recurring number in Star Trek, and I haven't paid attention this season to see if it started yet. But whenever they need a random number in a show, they will very often pick the number 47.
Do we know why?
There's no official explanation, though. I think Brandon Braga, who's one of the executive producers of Star Trek, I think he had said in an interview that it was 42 adjusted for inflation.
That's funny. But that's a good joke, even if it's not true. I think it's great. So last episode, we found out that Worf has a tragic backstory. This episode, we find out that Bev has a tragic backstory. I was like, oh, wow, all these things I don't know. That she was on a colonist's planet. Was it Arvada? Is that what it was? Arvada 3? But like her grandma, I think she said, was the person who helped colonize it. And he was like, "Oh, I didn't know you grew up there. It was a terrible thing that happened there." And we don't get to actually find out what happens. He's just referencing some terrible backstory of Bev's that we're going to get to learn eventually, I'm sure.
Yeah. We do find out a little more about the grandma that Beverly mentions in a future season episode. And it's an interesting episode. I'm very, very. I think it's in season 7.
Oof, that's a ways away. Yeah,
but it's a wild one. We'll get there.
Okay, so do they usually fire the phasers and the photons, or was that extra?
I think that was extra. They wanted a full spread of weapons.
I thought that was interesting,
so that they could catch it. Because the photons, they sent a spread of like 5 or 6 of them.
Okay, so this episode was directed by Les Landau, but he's the one that took over the super racist Wakanda episode, right? Away from the super racist guy. Oh yeah, okay. So he took over for Russ Mayberry on Code of Honor, and so this is his first episode that's like his full credited episode. And I looked, and he has a huge list.
It looks like he's got 34 TNG credits,
including one that looks like with Deanna's mom. Because that looks like Deanna's mom. I can't think of her name right now in his memory Alpha's picture. But yeah, I was excited to see him, like, and because I was looking at it, I was like, I know that name from somewhere, and not just because it's Landau. I looked up to see if he was related to Martin Landau and Juliet Landau, but I can't find any relation. But I was excited to see that he is here and directing more. So I looked up and saw that he does a bunch more. And I mean, I liked this episode, although it did have 3 separate plots and not a single one involving Wesley. And that's like a crime.
Yeah. Also, the I guess the original storyline, they had intended for a more overt romantic story between Picard and Beverly. Like, I think the original plan was actually Picard would be the one injured, and Beverly would confess her feelings to him while taking care of him. And then they swapped it so that it was Picard taking care of her. But I think it was actually Gene Roddenberry who didn't want the romance to be part of it. I think particularly in the first season, Gene Roddenberry was kind of against any kind of like long running character arcs. Because I think he was still thinking of it in terms of like the original series, where everything was very standalone. So I don't know why he would protest it here when they have been like setting up the romance between them in other episodes.
Yeah, I know. To me, it seems very obvious. I'm not usually someone that ships people. It's not really. I'm like, whatever happens, whatever the writers do, but I really do want to see Bev and Picard get together. Well, we're not going to talk about Star Wars.
Yeah, I was just going to bring up. I was just like, okay, Raylo.
Yeah, so I was very much for after The Last Jedi, I wanted to see Rey and Ben get together and redeem Ben, but they ended it so terribly that I just kind of forgot about Reylo because they ruined my love of the. I wanted to see Han Solo and Leia Organa's child come and be redeemed and realize all the bad things he's done, redeem himself, become a better person, and like fix the galaxy, not die. Sorry, spoilers.
Well, what are you talking about? He put on the boyfriend sweater.
He did put on the boyfriend sweater. I actually have a pop figure of him in the boyfriend sweater. Anyway, yes. So Reylo, I did get a little crazy about Reylo, mostly because I wanted to see that kid redeemed so bad. So that's my only other ship of my life, really, is that one. And I don't even know if I call it a ship. I just want to see them together. They seem so good for each other. I don't know. I like them. They're two of my favorite characters. I mean, everybody likes Picard, though, right? There's nobody walking around going, "Oh, I hate Picard."
If I meet somebody like that, I'm just going to automatically distrust them.
Anyway, I loved both these episodes for Geordi. I loved both of them because we got to see through his visor and we got to see him put on his big boy pants and do a good job. Like, I thought that was really cool to see him. We got character development on Worf. I mean, yes, Wesley was missing, but I loved both these episodes because it felt like we were really starting to develop the crew. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so it really made me like, excited for like, okay, we're at the end of season 1. They're finally getting their like feet under them. Clearly the writer's room was like, we have to start fleshing out these characters because they gave 2 characters I've been disappointed haven't had enough screen time and plots and development and everything. And I was really excited about that.
And it's the 2 black actors.
Oh, that's true. I didn't even think of it that way. But yeah, it's true. It's both black actors getting 2 episodes too is really good. Oh, the last thing that I'll say before we end this episode is the monsters, not the monsters. What were they? They were alien robots, I guess.
Yeah,
they were
alien robots.
Looked like Battlestar Galactica, the fracking toasters. I kept waiting for somebody to say fracking toasters. Cylons, that's what it was. They had the little visor thing, like the kit. Like thing.
And it did scan back and forth like that.
Yeah, it did. And I was like, oh, fracking toasters. And nobody ever said it, of course, but I did.
Well, Battlestar Galactica existed at that point, but frack as a BSG thing didn't come around until the 2000s series.
But toasters did, right? They called them toasters in the original one. I think that's why, because I remember when I had only seen a couple episodes of the original Battlestar, and then I watched the new one, and as everybody was, I was all into it because it's really good. And I remember asking people, why do they call them toasters? And I'm pretty sure it's a reference to something from the old one. But,
well, the original Cylon costume from the original show did kind of look like they had a toaster on their head. So
I think this is such a tangent, but I think it was so smart that they used Cylons that look like people because it made it so much more relatable. But yeah, the whole time I was like, oh, they look like Cylons. And I thought that was cute. I'm excited to finish season 1 and see where season 2 goes, because I have a feeling that season 2 is where, well, you've told me it because of the beard, right? Season 2 is where the beard comes in. Yeah. I'm looking forward to seeing because the development that's been happening in these last few episodes is really making me enjoy the show more, because now I'm getting to know each and every character.
Yeah. And I don't know if we've talked about this, but one of the edicts that Roddenberry had in the writer's room for the first couple seasons is that he didn't want the crew to have conflicts with each other.
Interesting.
Because in this future, humanity has worked out all of their issues, so they don't fight with each other anymore. So the conflicts should come from without the ship and not within. But the writers hated it, because when you tell them that their characters can't have conflicts with each other, that's like a huge arm tied behind your back while you're writing. Like that's what story is.
Conflicts with each other. I mean, that's what I work in an office at a school, and inside of my office there's 6 of us, and I don't get along with every single person, and we have conflicts. And that's what, that if you were going to write a movie or a show about my work, the conflicts between us and between other people within the school and stuff would be the main driving force plot. And so without having any sort of conflict or romantic going between different crew members, you're going to lose humanity, because humans have conflict and humans have romantic feelings for the most part,
And conflict isn't necessarily a bad thing. There's good
conflict helps us grow. Like, if you never have to fight something that's hard and figure out and decide how you're going to navigate it, you're never going to grow as a person. So it's a weird edict, and conflict doesn't have to be, I'm right, you're wrong, we can never come see eye to eye. Conflict can be, I'm right, you think you're right, let's figure out who's right.
Conflict can be a dialectical thesis and antithesis reaching synthesis. That's what it should be.
Yeah.
And and you see some of that, like, in this episode when the chief engineer came up and was questioning Geordi, that was conflict.
And that made Geordi have to grow and make the decisions, and it develops a character. So as a person who's a writer myself, I would feel completely hamstrung to have conflict taken away as a human experience for writing.
Yeah,
because conflict is where a lot of drama and interest comes from.
As Jean's health worsened and other people took over the writer's room, they pretty much got rid of that edict, which I think was a good thing for the show and really helped the characters grow. So looking forward to that.
Okay, and thanks for joining us today. I'm Ari.
And I'm GayFesh.
And until next time,
live long and prosper. Thank you for listening. You can find more episodes on Apple, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. We're on Twitter at RestBothWorlds. Join our Patreon at patreon.com/restwithbothworlds for bonus content and hear your name at the end of each episode.